just clarify a little bit of that. As far as my Marine Corps service, when I was deployed overseas to the Middle East, it was in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, and as far as being a combat veteran, the most shots I ever fired were warning shots. Because once we started firing some warning shots, usually everybody would just run, which was good for me at least. But about this meeting, about grassroots lobbying workshops, this is such a valuable tool because in Jefferson City, and I'm sure this has already been discussed and the points have been hit on a number of times today, we're term limited. So if we can serve 8 years in the House if we continually get reelected, and they can do another 8 years in the Senate if the senators continually get reelected. Last year, when the last class to leave, when the senior class was turned out, I think there was only about 10 people that actually left, maybe 15. So it was a very, very small senior class. That means that most of the people in the House of Representatives had only been there for less than 6 years. The problem with this, though, is that the lobbyists are around for 10, 20, 30, in some cases 40 years. We just had a lobbyist recently retire last year, and he had been lobbying in Missouri since he got home from World War II. That's how long he'd been there. And he had, for a long time, before a lot of reform and ethics reform was done, the man had a lot of power, and he had a lot of influence over legislators. The other problem with the way this kind of works right now is because we're only there sometimes for as little as 2 years, and at the most 8 years if you manage to stay throughout your whole time that you're allowed to. We spend about $26 billion a year. Spending in the state of Missouri has gone up by 60% in the last 15 years. So the budget issue is enormous. So we have to have multiple budget committees just to handle small portions of a $26 billion budget. It's really hard for legislators to be experts on a lot of things, let alone become experts on just one thing in the 8 years that they have there. So oftentimes what the legislators might do is they might start being a little bit more responsive to the lobbyists because they see the lobbyists as having more adequate, up-to-date information. Or else, what I really don't like is they, in many cases, actually become more responsive to the bureaucrats. And I have a big problem with that. Okay? Bureaucrats, in many cases, most cases, all cases really, are unelected. In some cases, they're appointed. But in other cases, they're just hired by the people that were appointed by the governor or some other department or agency head. So that means that the people at large have to compete with the expertise that exists in the lobbying corps and also in the bureaucratic corps. Okay? And this can be very difficult and it can be very frustrating for lobbyists. I'm sorry, for people, for the citizen lobbyists. Because what drives the citizen lobbyist is not the fact that they're getting paid to go to Jefferson City to talk about bills. Citizen lobbyists are not getting paid to fly to New York City or San Francisco to attend huge conferences on complex issues. Citizen lobbyists wind up in Jefferson City because the night before they were watching the television and they got really angry about something that their government was doing. And so they decided to cancel some of the plans that they had the next day, take the 2-hour, 3-hour, sometimes 4-hour trip to Jefferson City, and try to catch their representative and talk to them about an issue that they're concerned with. And usually, they oftentimes get into Jefferson City a little bit too late because by the time they heard about an issue, it's already been to committee. It's already had a vote on the House floor. So I think the citizen lobbyist, that has got to be just as frustrating as anything I can imagine. For people to be so concerned and tied to an issue and to have information on an issue that they can actually lend their experience or their expertise, only to find out that the bill's already gone so far, and the people in cases like that, they didn't really even have a fighting chance. So that means, just like anything else, it becomes a chess match, right? It becomes a very calculated, thoughtful, deliberate process. You have to be very careful about how you approach people. You have to be careful about being cognizant of people's time. I remember going to one meeting a few years ago, and some people heard for the first time when you go into a representative's office, if you go there, short notice, as the scenario I just laid out, always preface that with, hey, I know you're really busy, just 2 minutes. And that can do an awful lot to kind of disarm a representative who feels like he has to rush out to the committee or get to the House floor or cast a vote or go talk to somebody else and say, oh, okay, 2 minutes, yeah, I can do that. And things like that can really help. I had an issue. I'm trying to remember exactly. Here's what it was. It was the gasoline tax. Here's how important grassroots lobbyist activists and those efforts are. Last year, when we debated the gasoline tax going on the ballot, I'm dead set against it. I had always voted against it before. Always against it. And the reason I'm against it is because we're spending 60% more money now than we were 15 years ago. There's money out there for the roads. There's money there for it. Auditor Schweik's about ready to release an audit on MoDOT, and already the word is that it's not going to be pretty because MoDOT can be highly inefficient. No surprise there, right? Just like any other bureaucracy. But after the second year that this issue came up, I was under a lot of pressure from some leaders in my district. Some elected leaders and some bureaucratic local leaders. And so, even me, who's always voted against tax, written against it, done podcasts and videos, been engaged in debates on taxes, things like that, like you feel, regardless of how you're going to vote, you can still feel the pressure. And so I told some people at one of our meetings in Franklin County, one of our Republican Club meetings, I said, listen, I'm feeling a lot of pressure on this. It is important for me to hear from the people on this issue. And that's all I needed to say. Within the next 2 or 3 days, my phone had rung off the hook. Sean was answering the phones, and I had at least 2 pages of front and back legal pads of people calling saying, we don't want you to vote for this bill. And it's so important for me to be able to go to the bureaucrats, go to other politicians who just want your money, and be able to show them, here's all these people from my district who are telling me no. Because at that point, I can also tell them they're the ones who I was elected to be responsive to, not to you. So I already knew, sometimes you know how you're going to vote on things, but it's so beneficial, it helps so much to have the support of the grassroots of the people actually come out and back you up, and actually lend their efforts, lend the weight that they carry to some of these really heavy issues that we have sometimes. So, to have the grassroots involved, as frustrating as it is, as much as you sacrifice, because I know that when you all drive to Jefferson City, likely there's not a company that's going to reimburse you for your gas mileage. I know that. I know that when you come out, when we have to be on the floor at 10 o'clock in the morning and you have to drive from as far away as Hannibal, Missouri, it might be a 3 or 4 hour trip and you might have to leave at 5 o'clock in the morning just to make sure that you can get there on time. And so I believe that the people that show up in Jefferson City, the people that are making the phone calls from their homes, those people are sacrificing a lot more time, energy, and money than any lobbyist and any bureaucrat. And so what you're putting into it, although it can be really frustrating sometimes, and sometimes the victories come few and far between, don't discount the fact that you carry a lot of credibility. You really do. You carry a lot of weight, and your efforts do not go unnoticed. When I first got to Jefferson City in 2011, I was fortunate. I had an opportunity to kind of come up through grassroots, right? And through Tea Parties and through Republican and conservative grassroots organizations. I got an opportunity to speak a lot. So when I got to Jefferson City, people looked at me as the grassroots guy, the Tea Party guy. And so whenever a bill came up that first year, some people in the leadership often come to me, right? Because the grassroots, there was a huge wave of grassroots, right? 2009, 2010, 2011. They would actually come to me and say, Paul, how do the people feel about this? Now, they probably don't want to call all you together and ask you, but they're concerned. So when you show up, they take notice. And the other interesting dynamic here is about as far as people that run for elected office. It seems like so many people in Jefferson City think that they're the next congressman. They think they're the next governor. A lot of them are thinking about what's next on that political ladder. Right? And you know what? It's human nature. Just like if somebody gets a job in the corporate world, they're thinking about that. I get it, understand. But because that exists and because they actually have to rely on you to help them get there, they are concerned about how you think. They are concerned about phone calls that come in. They are concerned about the things that are said on Facebook or on Twitter or the kind of things that are said in email threads that are going around. So you might not always be in tune to that. You might not always be sensitive to those things that are going on, the dynamic that takes place in Jefferson City. But I'm telling you from the guy that's there and sensitive to it myself, that they are. But then again, at the same time, I'm glad that we talked a lot about relationships and what Sean said about public servants. Because of human nature is human nature. And because that sometimes when people do climb the corporate ladder really fast or the political ladder really fast, you just need to expect to encounter people that are going to resist you because they think that they're more important. You just have to accept that that's going to happen. I remember when I was in the Marine Corps, I was a Marine Corps martial arts instructor. I was the guy. I went through a really difficult school to learn hand-to-hand combat in a way that allowed me to teach it to battalions of Marines before they had to ship off to Iraq and Afghanistan. And the problem is outside of maybe one or two little skirmishes or a few hockey fights, I've never really been in like an all-out like UFC ground and pound type of fight. And so I'm in this class, and my instructor said, I need a volunteer. He said, is anybody, well, let me preface that. He said, who here has never been knocked out before? And stupid me raised my hand. And a few other Marines did too, but I did, you know, I mean, someone was raising their hand. But they had also known that I had never been in like a ground and pound, you know, fight to the finish type of ordeal. So my squad leader, who used to be my squad leader, he's actually the instructor now, and he calls me up. And he said, I'm not going to hit you, okay? He's like, I'm just going to tap you on the back of the head and show you how easy it is for someone to get lightheaded or pass out. And I was, you know, okay. So he said, just lean forward a little bit. And he said, I'm going to count to 3. And when I count to 3, I'm just going to smack you on the back of the head, just a little. And I was like, oh, great. So I leaned forward, and he counted to 3. He didn't hit me on 3, he hit me on 2. He said 1, 2, and just popped me on the back of the head. And immediately I just went straight to the ground. He hit me hard. But what he told me, and what he told the rest of the class, was he said, if you're scared of getting hit, you're going to lose the fight. You have to expect the fact that you're going to get hit. When you go into combat, you have to expect the fact that somebody is there to try to kill you. Once you can wrap your mind around that fact, it will make you a much more efficient soldier, a much more efficient Marine. So as Grassroots, as they head into this fight of ideas and this battle of influence, you have to expect the fact that there are going to be people there that human nature is going to take over, and they're going to be mean, they're going to be nasty. But that means, like, I really like what Dave said, that we just need to approach it knowing this. Because that way we can approach it with a little bit extra degree of grace. We can approach it knowing that we have a better handle on exactly the dynamics that are at play than even they do. Because once we can expect that, we can understand that, it makes our job a whole lot, our job as legislative, our job as citizen activists. It makes it a whole lot easier to handle, because when you go home at night and you put your head on the pillow, it's a lot easier to get over the fact that somebody turned you down, or somebody said no, or somebody didn't want to work with you. Because you were already expecting it when you went into that fight, when you went into that battle. You were already expecting it. And so that makes it a little bit easier. I think it helps strengthen resolve, and it just helps, as far as that's concerned, it just helps you maintain that encouragement that you need to stay in the fight. And that's what's really so important, is that you stay in the fight. Nobody ever won a fight that they either A, wouldn't fight, or that B, they back out or go fast. You have to stay engaged. And so things like this, talking about human nature, talking about the dynamics, talking about things that you can understand, talking a little bit more about the process, is extremely valuable. And I actually wish that I would have been able to sit in this before I actually had to swear in, because it really would have helped me out. Because what happened to me when I first went to Jefferson City is I was overwhelmed with a lot of frustration. Because I thought for sure, after the Tea Party movement, after all these grassroots, after the libertarian-minded, liberty-minded people just kind of rose up and started talking about philosophy and principles, I was thinking, I'm going to run to Jefferson City, plant a Gadsden flag on the dais, and yell, and that was going to be the end of it. But you know, the issues can be really complex. If anybody's been following, you know, if you've been following any of the bills that I've been working on in the Committee of Government Efficiency, that forces me to deal with some highly complex issues. And so it's not just about guns and babies. Those are the easy votes to take. When you're voting for Second Amendment rights, those are the easy votes to take. Ryan has a scorecard where they score all these legislators. There's legislators that scored F, that still voted pro-life and pro-gun. But there's a lot of issues that it means that we have to apply some philosophy. It means that we have to understand numbers. It means that we have to actually understand how the principles of liberty and capitalism and free markets actually work with the public sector or work just within the private sector, so we actually know what the parameters of government are on those issues. My drill instructor in the Marine Corps, another Marine Corps story real quick, and then I'll be done. When I first went to boot camp, I don't really tell the story a lot because I think it's rather telling, but when I first went to boot camp, you have to understand, I grew up in a very conservative Christian home. And so boot camp was a culture shock to me. Now, I knew it. I knew what I was expecting because I was reading books and I wanted it so bad. But I remember actually going to my drill instructor at the first week and saying, you know, you have to speak in third person in Marine Corps boot camp. And I remember going up to my drill instructor at the end of the first week and saying, "Sir, Recruit Curtman requests permission to speak to Senior Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Carson, sir." Or Cartwright. And he said, "Speak, freak." And I was like, I said, "Sir, this recruit wants to be a reservist." Because I was signed up for active duty, right? You know, infantry, you know, travel the world and blow a bunch of stuff up. And he said, and immediate, you know, if you read a book about Marine Corps boot camp, this kind of stuff happens with like 95% of the recruits. Like you're trying to make sense of this new chaotic world that you're in. And in some cases, people are trying to figure out how they can get out of it altogether or how they can just adapt to it. And he said, "Come back and talk to me tomorrow." So the next day, I went back and I said, "Sir, this recruit wants to be a reservist." Because I'm thinking that all 4 years of boot camp or all 4 years of the Marine Corps, I was under the impression that it was going to be just like boot camp. Okay, that's why I was like, I don't know, like, this is crazy. These crazy guys running around these Smokey the Bear hats for 4 years, no way. Well, then I finally realized, you know what? I made a commitment. I'm here for 4 years. And so I'm not going to be the Marine that tries to get out of things. I'm going to be the Marine that runs the fastest. I'm going to be the Marine that shoots the straightest. And by the time I leave in 4 years, I'm going to be a squad leader and I'm going to be a sergeant. Most Marines, out of a company of about 220 Marines, we might have had 6 or 7 sergeants. And I determined, it's like, I'm going to be a leader. I was quickly promoted. I became a sergeant. I was first squad because I made the decision that I was going to be there. But my drill instructor told me one time on the drill field, knowing that I was struggling with this new adapting process, he pulled me out of formation one time while we were drilling, and he said, he just walked over to me, and not yelling at me, he just kind of grabbed my shoulder and he said, "Curtman," he said, "drill, when we're marching, and you're hearing all these orders about how to turn," he goes, "drill is a thinking man's game. You have to think about the orders that you're given. You have to anticipate what order is going to be coming next. You have to be a thinker. You can't just come here. We're not asking you to come here and just follow everybody. You need to come here and be a thinker in your own right." And I think that same story, that same principle applies a lot in politics. We have to anticipate the relationships that could be good, the relationships that could be bad. We have to anticipate how one person's going to think of one bill versus somebody else. And we have to make sure that we, as much as possible, we have a 360-degree situational awareness to actually understand the whole battlefield in front of us. It's a battle of ideas and it's a battle of influence. And so things like this, I think, really help us gain that perspective and the clarity that's out there and that exists. And so I think that my time in the Marine Corps, my time as a financial advisor, really kind of helped me prepare for this. But things like this, I know, sure would have helped me prepare a whole lot better. And I think it's extremely valuable to anybody who wants to be effective in our own governance, to be a government by the people and for the people. So thanks for the opportunity to just be able to share that with you. And I hope that I was able to encourage you. So as the session continues to grow and becomes more frustrated, just know that you're not the only ones. We're all there together, but it's easier to overcome when we anticipate the fact that we know it's going to be a difficult battle, and we're expecting it. So thank you very much.